Not that long ago, I made a video discussing the PS5's UI and how, in spite of its technical innovation, I thought it fell short in terms of delivering a next-gen user experience. One of the comments I made in that video was that video game interfaces in general are bad when talking about being intuitive. They often look cool, but when you dig beneath the surface and start using them, it becomes pretty clear that not a lot of thought went into making them as easy to use as possible. Like many people, I've been spending some time with Cyberpunk recently, and bugs and performance issues aside, one of the most immediate things I noticed was how hard the UI is to use. Just like many other games, I think it does a great job at selling the futuristic look, but intuitive and enjoyable aren't words I'd use to describe the feeling of using it. Now, to be clear, this isn't just a pile on Cyberpunk. The game has its fair share of problems. I should know, I've been playing on the PS4 Pro after all, but despite these, I've actually been really enjoying it. However, its interface design is without question the biggest problem next to its technical issues if you ask me, and I think it's an excellent example of how video game interface design is miles behind most other software. So in this video, I want to discuss the major problems with the UI and what can be done to improve it. My name is Louis, and when I'm not making videos about gaming, I'm a product designer. So join me while I combine two of my favourite things for an analysis of Cyberpunk 2077's UI. Cyberpunk, being an RPG, has many interfaces that let you complete a wide variety of tasks, from character customization to crafting to modifying how you play the game. The amount of control given to the player here is impressive. The problem isn't a lack of features or even the bugs that sometimes get in the way. The problem is that so much of Cyberpunk's interface design is far more convoluted than it should be. A good user interface, or UI, should allow you to complete the task at hand with as little effort as possible. At its core, this is what being intuitive is, and it's an important component of a good user experience. A good UI should never get in the way or require you to think more than you need to. Cognitive load is a term commonly thrown around when discussing interface design, and it basically refers to the amount of demand being put on your brain to process things. The least amount of cognitive load is almost always the ideal path, and reducing the amount of work your brain has to do is what makes things feel fast and intuitive. So a good UI can be defined by how simple it is, or to be more accurate, how simple it feels to use. Unlike other types of design where style is often one of the most important components, style can actually get in the way of a good user experience. Too much embellishment or superfluous design elements can create clutter and distract or disorient. To put it another way, less is usually more when talking about interface design. Not all interfaces are the same, of course, and style can sometimes improve the experience, such as providing a feeling of safety or luxury, but usability should always be the top priority, and this is why many games have bad UIs. They compromise usability to fit within a theme or some other kind of design aesthetic. Okay, so hopefully that gives you enough of a template for what a good UI should look like, and with this knowledge, let's jump into Cyberpunk and see how it fares. A good place to start is the map, because it's a central UI component, essential for completing missions and getting around. It also demonstrates a couple of the key issues with Cyberpunk's interface design. At first glance, it's quite attractive. From a design point of view, it's a beautiful way to present what might otherwise be very boring information. I could easily see it being used in a film, and overall it looks polished and modern. It can be very challenging to use though because of how much strain it puts on your eyeballs, and there's a number of reasons for this. As you can see, there's a ton of icons without labels, which demands you remember what each one represents. Remember cognitive load? This is a good example of that. These icons are also tiny, highly detailed, and sometimes tightly packed together, making it hard to distinguish one from the other. They probably look great on a large high-res display, but for anyone not playing on a 75-inch 4K screen or who doesn't have access to an enhanced machine, they're not as functional as they could be.
Enhanced 15 to 23.
There is a legend which you can toggle on and off, but ideally you shouldn't need one. The legend also makes the screen even more overwhelming, and the icon to toggle it off disappears when it's open. These icons are also kind of abstract. So for example, the map marker looks like this, when something like this would be more recognizable. Cyberpunk's map icon is kind of close, but also different enough that it's not immediately clear what it is. A simple icon family designed to work at a small size would make this screen much easier to use. How about the fonts then? The choice of a red coloured font sitting against a red background makes the map options difficult to read. You can change the colorblind settings to fix this, but obviously that's a bit of a workaround. Adding an opaque box behind them might not look as attractive, but it would definitely provide more contrast and allow you to see these options more clearly. Let's move on to another important part of the UI, the HUD. The head-up display, or HUD, is an interface you'll spend a lot of time looking at. It does a lot of heavy lifting because it has to provide you with many forms of time-critical information. These include, but aren't limited to, updating you on story events, letting you know what's happening during gameplay, updating you on your progress, and keeping you informed of your health and ammo. This information needs to be quickly scannable so that you can remain focused on what's happening. In other words, you don't want to be squinting at the HUD for too long because you might crash into some thugs and inadvertently start a gang war. Unfortunately, the same issues from the map screen are here too, and they're made even worse now because they're overlaid on a highly detailed game world. In addition to the tiny icons and text that blends into the scenery, this screen also does a poor job at grouping relevant information together. Your mission information, for example, is displayed in two locations at the opposite ends of the screen. Grouping it together would not only allow you to see all of this info with a single glance, but it would reduce clutter as well. The phone UI is also broken into two separate elements. It makes sense that it would initially display in the center of the screen to capture your attention, and then move to the side so as not to get in the way. But appearing in both locations simultaneously is very distracting and takes up a lot of the screen. The other issue is that there's a lot of superfluous design in the form of window dressing. This is supposed to make the UI look more technical and futuristic, which it does, but it also makes it much harder to find the information that you need. This is a classic situation where less design would improve the usability. The biggest problem with Cyberpunk's UI from my point of view though is the lack of consistency. It all fits the Cyberpunk aesthetic perfectly and it's gorgeously designed, but almost every screen is different. Stylistically they look similar, but each has its own rules for styling, alignment and placement. Nowhere is this lack of consistency more obvious than when you start up the game. There are 3 separate screens which ask you to press a button to continue, and each time the button you need to press is different. In fact, the only thing that is consistent across the UI is the aforementioned icons and poor color choices for fonts. The end result is that these interfaces aren't cohesive. What's true in one screen isn't necessarily true in another. This requires each menu and UI to be learned individually, which significantly increases the amount of, you guessed it, cognitive load. Headings are a perfect example of something that can greatly improve a user experience if they're presented consistently throughout the UI. Ideally, headings should use the same color, size, and placement in each screen. This will allow people to immediately recognize them as they move through the UI and quickly make sense of complex layouts and menus. Not only do a lot of these screens have different heading styles, but they often lack a visual hierarchy. Creating a hierarchy is important because it will help guide a person's eyes to the most important information. This is why headings are usually large or a different color or bold or all of the above. It allows them to stand out so that you don't have to read everything on the screen to understand what's going on. Let's take a look at the inventory when visiting a vendor UI to see how Cyberpunk gets this wrong. The primary purpose of this interface is to allow you to see all of the items you have and display a secondary list of items that you can acquire. Being able to sort and filter both lists is important because it will make it much easier to see what you have and what you need. Therefore, the inventory headings are a critical piece of information on this page because they identify the 2 separate lists. Filters and sorting are also important because they are the tools that will help you find things, and they describe how the items are organized. But as you can see, the funds are larger than the inventory headings and also have a yellow symbol which makes them stand out the most. The filters and sorting drop-down menus have the same font size as the headings, which makes it hard to distinguish between titles, options, and supplementary information. The right and left justification of the main headings also makes it less clear that these are 2 separate lists. Another problem with this screen is that when you highlight something, the details panel opens on top of the existing information, making an already busy page even more so. So how can we fix this screen? The first thing I would do would be to establish a clear hierarchy of information. Changing the size of the headings and their color would be an easy way to achieve this. I would then change the alignment of these headings to be consistent. I would also add a persistent label letting you know which filters are selected to make it clear what you're looking at. I'd change the sorting heading to sort by, and I'd change the default value from default to something like newest or name, as it's unclear how default organizes items. By the way, you'll have to forgive the font that I've used. I know it's not an exact match, but it'll do for this mockup. Highlighted items should stand out from the background, allowing you to easily focus on the panel that opens up. A drop shadow and/or background overlay would be an easy solution here. Finally, I'd move the select and close options to the center and give them more visual weight, as these are two of the most common commands. I'm guessing that select probably needs a label too. This is still far from perfect, but you can see with a few small tweaks that this screen could be far easier to understand. One other tool that would be useful is some form of onboarding to help new players, particularly those unfamiliar with RPGs, get up to speed. Ideally, this would be accomplished in-game, like how the combat training is handled, but building these types of tutorials is probably a lot of work to implement, so another solution could be tooltips. This method is actually used once in the map screen, but then never again. Admittedly, these little prompts are a bit of a band-aid solution, and in many situations can be frustrating or distracting, but when done well they can be extremely useful. They break down the UI into bite-sized chunks, making the process of learning where everything is less stressful. So long as they can be skipped or turned off, adding something like this to each screen the first time you see it would be a good idea. While there are a lot of problems with the UI, I think many of them can be fixed quite easily. Like so much of Cyberpunk 2077 at launch, it all just feels a little underdeveloped. Hopefully CD Projekt Red plans to update this at some point, because in many other ways this is one of the most remarkable games I've ever played. Clearly stability, performance and glitches should be the priority, but long term it would be great to see the entire experience be brought up to the same high standard. If you've been playing the game, I'd love to get your thoughts on it so far. Have you been struggling with the UI, or have you simply not noticed until now? In which case, you're welcome. Drop me your thoughts below, like if you enjoyed this video and want to see more, subscribe and hit the bell to stay up to date with all my videos, but otherwise, thanks for your time.